of Germany, and Germany, as you all know, probably most surely is holding the EU presidency in the latter half of 2020 from July to December. And against this political background and against the background, of course, of the big crisis Europe is facing with the pandemic and with lots of other challenges, we want to use the campus and the conference as a public forum in order to stress and highlight the essential role of civic education, of civic citizenship education for the recovery of Europe, which the EU Commission is trying to push with a number of impressive decisions. But what we as citizenship educators are a little bit disappointed at is, of course, that the whole area of education and indeed citizenship education is until now lacking from all the ambitious programs of the European Commission. And that's why we are convinced that European societies, as they undergo, they're facing challenges and have to undergo enormous changes in the coming years, caused, among other things, of course, by the pandemic, but also if you think of the digital and the ecological challenges the European Union is facing, we need more than ever citizens who are able to understand, adapt, and to learn. For example, to distinguish reliable from unreliable information and conspiracy theories, to deal with uncertainty and an unknown future, and of course, to participate politically in the decisions that we need to make in the coming years. In short, we are convinced that we are facing a watershed moment for citizenship education in Europe, understood in its broadest sense. We need to foster the capacities and dispositions of the population at large in order to participate and to stabilize, indeed, democracy. So on that note, what better moment than to advocate for citizenship education on all levels, and what better moment here to start our campus series with a project from the University of Göttingen aiming at enhancing political knowledge of young people, so-called hard-to-reach people, about the European Union and its workings. And on that note, again, I'd like to give the floor to Märthe Stamer and Monika Oberle, and I'm looking forward to a really interesting hour and presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this introduction to the whole series, and we are very happy here, Märthe-Maria Stamer and I, to be able to hold the first presentation in the series, and we are happy for the opportunity to present you our current Jean Monnet project, JUMPER, reaching the hard to reach with civic education on the EU. And we are especially thrilled that it is such an international audience that we are speaking to today. I heard you are from Italy, UK, Poland, Morocco, and other countries. So that would be really interesting, and we want to encourage you to really ask questions and give critical comments after the presentation. Our presentation will be uploaded in the Housebase SharePoint after our presentation today. So this evening we will upload the slides, and please feel free to stop us and ask questions during the presentation if you don't understand something, but please postpone discussion and critical comments to after the presentation. We won't speak more than 30 minutes. Since now it is already 5:13, we will keep short to maximum of 25 minutes. And if you want to say something, please either use your blue hands. You find them, in the participant list. You have a blue hand next to your name, and you can hold it up without effort. And if you don't find it, perhaps also due to your software, you can just put a plus sign or something into the chat, and then we see that you wanted to say something. And if all this doesn't work, you just wave and we see you. And the longer questions, please put them into the house space part, as Mr. Peterson-Janik already said. So with this, I start, and in a few minutes hand over also to Märthe, of course. And these are the slides. You should be able to see them now. All right. Reaching the hard to reach with civic education on the European Union. So what is the background, our starting point? First of all, we see that civic education on the European Union is very important because EU-related political competencies are necessary for what Christoph just said. He said that young people should be able to participate politically in the decisions of the coming years. And if you want to do so in Europe, you need to take into account the European multi-level system, including the decisions of the European Parliament and the Council of EU. In our view, competence doesn't mean that you only have to know something, doesn't only mean that you have to know something. You also need motivational and effective dispositions and also volition to use your skills in order to participate, to solve problems. In Germany, the EU indeed is a mandatory element of curricula at secondary schools. That is, in all 16 Länder of Germany, of the Federal Republic, the EU needs to be taught at school. However, there is a lack in practice, and that is especially salient in the vocational school sector. We see that the Standing Conference of the Ministers of Education and Cultural Affairs of the German Länder, they do recommend teaching about Europe and the EU at school. And they are just at this moment launching an updated recommendation. We're looking forward to that in a few weeks. But so far they have underlined that also the European Union is important and that all school types from primary school to vocational school should also tackle this topic. Finally, we see special problems of teaching the European Union. It is a very complex system, so you need to reduce complexity to a large extent in order to teach about it, especially in lower school levels. It is a very dynamic topic, so what you know might not be true anymore in 2 or 3 years' time. There's a perceived distance, perhaps a real distance, but at least a perceived distance from citizens to the European Union. And some people have stated that there's a lack of interest and certainly prejudices. When it comes to interest, we are not so sure because we see that the interest of young people in the European Union isn't really lower than in politics in general, and there's quite some interest there. But there are some prejudices. But why hard to reach learners? We see that people with low formal education show little connection with the political system. There's a lack of political representation. Also, people with a lower socioeconomic status tend to have more skeptical attitudes towards the EU. And then we see that people with more Eurosceptic attitudes and those who don't participate, they often show little objective and subjective perceived knowledge, which you could deduct from that it is good to heighten the knowledge in order to have more participation and more open attitudes. And finally, individuals with low feeling of self-efficacy, so they don't believe that they are able to influence something, they are an important target group for European citizenship education, but they have not been focused on enough so far. And finally, a change of political attitudes is most likely during the youth. So political interest might change in the years of the youth and then hold like this for the rest of the life, rather than tackle it in the later years of life, which doesn't mean that we don't need adult civic education. This brings us to Jumper. The Germany project Jumper is situated at the University of Göttingen in Germany. It was meant to last 1 year. Due to the corona pandemic, it now has been prolonged because we couldn't carry through all the workshops yet. And the special thing about this is the target group, of course, the hard-to-reach learners, which Märthe Stamer will tell you more about in a second, but also that we have a systematic evaluation of all the workshop material and the workshop methods and approaches that we develop. That is, we will implement the workshops, evaluate them, and then develop the material accordingly. Dissemination is planned through training seminars for multipliers and a closing conference next year. All the workshop materials will be able to be downloaded on our Jumper homepage. I must tell you at this point that it is developed in German language. So for now, it is a German language project, but if it's very successful, we might think about translating things as well. And that is now the moment where Märthe steps in.
Thank you very much. Welcome and good afternoon from my part as well. I'm going to walk you through a definition of the target group. So we're targeting hard-to-reach youth, and we are basing that on a NECE definition, actually, that was found, I think, at a NECE conference in Cordoba. And we define hard to reach as basically including educationally and socially disadvantaged people who are often forgotten by the mainstream of citizenship education or left behind in schools or other educational facilities. And often hard to reach youth are immigrants. So knowing this, the Jumper project specifically targets young people between the age of 15 and 27. That has something to do with German law, because until the age of 27, people are counted as young people. Most of the people we target are between 15 and their early 20s, and they have not obtained a Hauptschulabschluss, which is a basic certificate of secondary education in Germany, basically the most basic certificate that you obtain after 9 or 10 years of school. This is a map of the German education system, and you see on the left-hand side the different ages, and then circled in red you see a transition program which lasts 1 year, and usually the participants are 15 or a bit older. Yeah, so that's where we target our young people. In Germany, about 5.9% of pupils leave the education system without a school leaving certificate, and some of them end up in the so-called vocational transition system that you saw on the other slide. The BVJ and the BEK, which stand for Berufsvorbereitungsjahr or Berufseinstiegsklasse, two very short German words. Our language is famous for that, is one measure within the vocational transition system that is specifically designed for young people who did not complete basic secondary education, and it aims at integrating these young people into the labor market and give them some orientation as to what occupation they are going to pick up. And in 2016, about 110,000 young people started these two measures. So our target group is anything but small. The characteristics of the BVJ, BEK are very, very small classes, about 8 to 15 pupils. The groups are very heterogeneous, so the young people come from very, very different backgrounds, and there's no curriculum. So every school creates own concepts for the measures and tailors them to the specific needs of the specific participants that start the measure. The subject of civics is a marginalized subject in German vocational schools. It is assumed that young people in vocational schools are not politically interested. There's a lack of recognition of the relevance and importance of civic education. In vocational schools, there's rather a focus on work-related skills. But the vocational transition system is the last chance to reach our target group in a formal structure. And we need a kind of formal structure to make sure that the participants participate in the 2 days that our workshop lasts. So we think that the BVJ or BEK are very promising starting points for civic education for hard-to-reach youth.
Okay, so I take over again, and I can assure you that we will come in 3 minutes to the practical part of the presentation. So we will give you some insight into material that has been developed and the experience we have with it so far. But first, let's state the research questions. I told you that we have accompanying research to these workshops and this project. And the 2 main questions are, which dispositions do the target group have in relation to the EU? That is, what is the political knowledge? What are the political motivations, including the self-efficacy and the political attitudes towards the EU in this specific target group? We don't know enough about that yet for educational measures. And secondly, do our workshops, our intervention, do they change these dispositions? Do they convey more knowledge? Do they change the attitudes? Do students have more, a higher regard regarding their self-efficacy after taking part in the workshops? The research design is a mixed methods approach. So we have a questionnaire, a written questionnaire with mainly closed items at 3 times of measurement: before the workshop, after the 2-day workshop, and 6 or 8 weeks later. And we look at the knowledge, motivations and attitudes, change of them. We look at socio-demographic data and also participants' perspective on the workshops. Secondly, there's guideline-based qualitative interviews with some of the participants. I would be happy to present you the results. As I told you, our project came to a halt in March with the shutdown in Germany and the closing of the schools. So I can't tell you anything about the results yet, but we can discuss later our research design, because we did discover some problems when piloting it, but also we found some solutions how to carry through this research approach with this specific target group, which is not very interested in text, for example. The workshop concept is being developed in the course of the Jumper project. Aims are to provide participants with basic knowledge, to make the relevance of the EU palpable, and to facilitate political motivations, including especially the feeling of political self-efficacy regarding the EU. There's 2-day workshops with each lasting 6 hours every day. It is not longer because participants sometimes still work in the afternoon and sometimes they can't concentrate for a longer time. There's a maximum of 15 participants and there will be 10 workshops. A simulation game is in the center of the workshop, and the whole workshop tries to implement elements that are suitable for this target group. That is edutainment, avoiding reading tasks, reducing complexity, and another German word, Lebensweltorientierung. That's an orientation at participants' everyday life. You will see more examples for that later. And the last thing I want to tell you about is this a simulation game in the heart of the workshop, which Märthe will introduce to you in a second. And I don't know whether you're all familiar with simulation games, but they are an action, experience, and process-oriented method in civic education that has become quite often used and also quite successful. Learning objectives are to reduce complexity, especially regarding the political processes, to disseminate knowledge in a sustainable way, because it is based on experience. It is to connect the political with the everyday life of the learners, and to convey an insight into the difficulty of finding a political solution through compromises when you look at all these different interests. Of course, it is meant to motivate, to enhance political interest. And if you look at all these learning objectives, then they fit quite well to the problems of EU didactics that are stated above. It's not the perfect or only solution, but it seems to be a quite appropriate solution. And empirical studies show us indeed, we have conducted some at Göttingen University as well, that simulation games are a good way of teaching complex topics, that they are suitable not only for gymnasium grammar school, but also for vocational schools and even primary schools. They are suitable also for participants with a low prior political interest. They lead to an increase in knowledge and to a larger political interest and higher self-efficacy. They can counter political apathy and overcome prejudices regarding the political process. And finally, they seem to be an experience that is much enjoyed by many participants. And with this, I hand over to Märthe, who will present you the praxis of our workshops.
Yes, so we were thinking, although we cannot present any results to you yet, we're going to walk you through the workshop and show you some insights into the concept we've come up with. I'm going to start with the structure of the workshop. As Monika said, we are using 2 full school days. We're starting at around 8 a.m. and we finish between 1 and 3 in the afternoon, depending on how long a regular school day lasts. We start with the first questionnaire in the morning. Then we move on to introducing to the topic. We introduce ourselves. We try to convey why we're there. We're trying to link the European Union to the everyday lives of the participants to catch their interest. We then have a part on the European Union where we talk about the history of the European Union. Why do we have the European Union? How does it function? And then at the end of day 1, we start with the thematic focus of our workshop, which revolves around plastic garbage. At the end of day 1, we collect a quick feedback of the participants, see how they are, how they liked it, if they want any changes. And then on day 2, we meet again at 8 o'clock. We revisit the first day, and then the centerpiece of the workshop happens, the simulation game, which takes up most of day 2. And we carry out the simulation game and we do an evaluation as well. And then we have a visitor. We try to invite people who are active on a European basis. So we had a member of the European Parliament, we had volunteers who deal with European topics, and we have them interviewed by our participants. We then do a closing and another feedback, and then we end day 2 with the second questionnaire. And we now wanted to give you an insight into how exactly we do it. So how does the European Union work? We start by linking the European Union and the relevance of the European Union and the impact the European Union has on the everyday lives of the participants. We bring postcards and ask what comes to your mind when you think about the European Union, which postcard fits best, and then we hear the stories. And it's surprising how much the participants already know about the European Union. And then we have a part where we talk about the functioning and the history of the European Union. We walk the participants through the different institutions, and we try to convey the main task of the institutions without going too much into detail. The thematic focus of our workshop is plastic garbage. We have been looking for a topic for quite a while to find a topic that's interesting for our participants, but also a topic where it's not too hard to have a point or to defend a point of view that's not your own point of view. And plastic garbage seems to work quite well. So we give an introduction to plastic garbage, and we could you show the next slide? Because we look at an example. You probably all know the directive on lightweight plastic carrier bags that was started by the European Commission in 2013 and signed by 2015. And there should be a picture that shows how the different institutions were involved in coming up with this directive. So we use that example, and it's an example that lots of pupils also know about. They have a good age to remember that there were days when you got free plastic bags in supermarkets. That's the end of day one, and then we start with day two with the simulation game. The simulation game is introduced by storytelling. So first we present the method of the simulation game. We tell the pupils what they are supposed to do, and then we head off with a story. It's Matteo's story, who's Italian. He works in a factory that produces plastic packaging for fruit and vegetables. He gets up very early. He has to work a lot. You can see his factory on the next slide. So he works a lot. He needs the money to pay for his wife and their children. And then there's Anna, who, you see what he produces. There's Anna, who lives in Germany, and she likes to buy fruit and vegetables from Southern Europe. And then at one point she learns about plastic pollution in the ocean, and she thinks about all the plastic garbage that she produces and how she buys packaged fruit and vegetables in the supermarket. She writes a letter to the German government, who says, we can't deal with this alone. We need to find a European solution to plastic packaging of fruit and vegetables, which makes Anna travel to Brussels, to the heart of the European Union, to learn about the legislative processes on the European level. And at this point, how the European Union works, that's something that our pupils already know, because we have talked about that the day before. And they have a wallpaper that we produced the day before they can look at. And Anna in Brussels visits the different institutions and learns how especially the European Parliament works, that they're not only working in the plenary, but that they are mostly working in committees. And on the right-hand side, you see the industry committee and the environment committee, which is simplified, but that's the two committees that our pupils are using. And then the Plenary, exactly. So the scenario they are talking about is the reduction of plastic packaging for fruit and vegetables in the European Union. And there's 2 articles that our pupils are supposed to discuss. Article 1 is how should the European Union deal with plastic packaging of fruit and vegetables in the future? And there's 3 opinions on that. Some members of parliament say plastic packaging should be prohibited. Some say an extra fee of €1 per plastic package should be introduced. And there are others who say companies should abstain from plastic packaging on a voluntary basis. So that's question 1. And question 2 is, when should the new law become effective? From now on, in 2 years or in 10 years? And the pupils, we then we present them with the results of the European Parliament elections. They are kind of comparable to the real last European election in May 2019. Yes. We have the different political groups, and then we assign the pupils to the different political groups. We have different representatives. And then the pupils first meet in their country groups. They then meet in their political groups. Then they meet in the committees. They meet in their political groups again. They meet in the committees again, and then in the plenary, to show that not all members of parliament from one country have the same opinion, but that people from different countries in the same political group often have very similar opinions. This is an example for a roll card, P. Sanchez. We made little booklets from the roll cards, so they have 6 pages in total. And it was important to us to have a very clear structure. So on the left-hand side, you see Article 1, you see the 3 options, and you see very clearly marked which option P. Sanchez has. Exactly. And then there are some arguments listed below, and there's some space to take notes on other reasons or other arguments. And then every participant also receives a course of action, so they know exactly what happens when. Exactly. After the simulation game, we have a small break, and then we have our visitor. The pupils can collect questions during the 2 days of the workshop and ask them. And oftentimes they would like to know, they would like to compare their result from their simulation game to the reality, or they would like to know how it would happen in reality. We had 2 workshops carried out already. In one workshop, we had Viola von Kramon, a German member of the European Parliament, and we also had a representative from the YEF, the Young European Federalists. Exactly, and then we collect feedback again, and the participants fill out the second questionnaire, and that's the end of 2 days of workshops. So far, 2 workshops have taken place in March 2020, just before the lockdown. All other workshops have been postponed due to the corona pandemic. We're aiming at having a total of 10 workshops in different länder of Germany. So we do Lower Saxony, we do Saxony-Anhalt, we do Schleswig-Holstein. We have 3 training seminars for multipliers scheduled for spring next year, and we have a final closing conference also scheduled for March 2021, where we would like to disseminate our material and our results. And you have a link to our project website.
And with this, we thank you very much for your attention. We didn't talk longer than I told you we would, so I'm happy that we have 15 minutes left, 17 minutes for questions and comments and discussion. And as I said, for questions, you can either, and comments, you can raise your hand when you see the participant list and you can tick your blue hand. And I see one already. That's Chris Grimon Press. You can unmute yourself.
Chris, you can unmute yourself. We cannot hear you.
I'm sorry.
Now
sure.
We can hear you.
That's it. Yes. Thank you for the presentation. It was very instructive. I am impressed by your work. I have a question. I'm from the University of Leuven, and we work also on EU citizenship education. My question to you is, how do you motivate teachers or schools to take part in your workshops? Because in Belgium, there is an overburdened curriculum, and it's really hard to motivate them to take part. They lose hours. How do you do that?
Yes, and perhaps I start with answering this. Actually, it is a special situation for the vocational school system, because in the vocational school system, they don't have very much contact to universities, neither to approaches to education, nor evaluation and research approaches. So they were very open for such external visitors and these two-day workshops. But there was a special threshold, and that was that the teachers were sometimes afraid that their students weren't good enough. So they were afraid that perhaps we expected something from the pupils which they couldn't give us or couldn't show, that they didn't know enough, they weren't competent enough. And so especially Märthe Stamer convinced these teachers that it's exactly these students that we wish to talk to and to work with, that they don't need to know anything. And once this was made clear, they were very open, and we could have many more workshops than 10. So there's a lot of people who would like to work with us. I can tell you that with other schools, we also implemented many workshops. Primary school was no problem, because in primary school you are very flexible with your time schedule. And regarding secondary school, indeed, you sometimes need to go to the project weeks where they have more time, or you need to convince them that it is part of the curricula, and indeed it is part of the German curricula. So when they realize that what we do is something in order to achieve what they have to do, then they are more open. Thank you for the question.
I have a question. Monika, are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hear you, yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm from Ukraine. I'm from the university. And my question is, when you were planning the workshop, did you think about connection between your thematic and goals of sustainable development? Is it evident for you? What could you say?
Is it okay if I go again, Märthe, and then you answer the next one? That's a very good question, because we didn't in the first place. I'm also into education for sustainable development, but that wasn't our goal. And then we looked for a topic for our simulation game. And it was very soon very clear to us that plastic could be a good topic. It seems a bit boring at first, but then it is very palpable in everyday life. And our practical experiences in the workshops show that the students indeed were interested in the topic. And so, of course, these simulation games are education for sustainable development par excellence. We look at plastic, the problem, and we look at the necessity to solve the problem internationally. Not nationally, but internationally. And we see that there's very different interests. So the solution is not clear. we don't want plastic, but the young man in Southern Europe, in this case, he could also be situated in Germany. He wants to earn money, and we want to have this nice fresh fruit that perhaps doesn't grow in Germany in December. So it is something looking at sustainable development, and we could look at that more pointedly in the theoretical background. If that is what you are pointing at, I would absolutely agree.
Yes, thank you, because it's very important for us to spread your experience in Eastern European countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no questions right now, we have questions for you. One would be, we are very interested, you all have experiences with civic education and civic education regarding the EU, I guess, that's why you are here. So it would be a twofold question. One is, do you think such a workshop as ours could be suitable for your national contexts as well? And the second is, do you have certain experiences with hard to reach youth that you would like to share with us today?
To whom? Question for someone. Okay, can I join to this discussion in such way? I think this thematic is very absolutely actual. For instance, even for Eastern European countries such as Ukraine, we have, for instance, some months ago, we were working on developing case studies, and our case study were absolutely close to this problematic, and I will appreciate if you join and spread your experience, and we will share, and I will do, because now I have some possibilities to share your experience even in our countries. In our country, I mean Ukraine. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Case studies is really a good way, I think. I now was able to also look at the comments in the MySpace, or what's it called? I forgot.
House space.
House space. Our space.
House space.
Yes, I know. House space, right. And I read that it's possible to use it in Belgium. That's great. Then I see that there's two interesting questions. One is, how can we reduce complexity, and how can we convey a feeling of self-efficacy? Well, I mean, to reduce complexity, it is necessary to understand what is at the heart of the thing. Why do we have the European Union, and what is it good for, and what are very important points about how it's working? We did that even at primary school. We looked at the political system of the European Union, and our goal was that people should understand, the pupils should understand, that in the European Union, it is different nations, different countries who try to solve common problems together, but that they have different interests. And even within a country, there's very different interests and opinions. And in order to find a solution to the problems, there needs to be discussions and compromises and majority voting. That is the very heart of the teaching, even in primary school and also here. And the second thing, and here we come already to the self-efficacy question, is that it is a very interesting insight for learners to see that it is not Angela Merkel making a decision up there, but that it is people in the end, like you and me, who find their way into the European Parliament and to discuss problems and solutions and it is not clear in the beginning what the solution will be in the end. So it is worth to discuss, to make your point. And some students say they didn't think it is so personal, that it is really human beings who discuss problems from their point of view. And that's something they realize. And they realize that it could be also them who can participate. Of course, we know that there's not an infinite way of participation in politics in the European Union. So we also don't want to convey such a feeling that, I can change everything alone. It is a huge ship that is in the ocean out there. But they realize it's possible. It's possible to talk to parliamentarians. We have them in our workshops. They realize it's possible to talk with others, to form their opinion, that there's demonstrations, petitions, non-governmental organizations. And for us, that is a big realization in these workshops. Of course, that's my last statement for this, is it is just a starting point. We offer a starting point, and from that on, of course, people go through their lives also and have to find other sources of information and have to take other courses of the Federal Agency for Civic Education and discussions in the internet and whatever. But perhaps before we hand over the question to Laura, Märthe, what would you say regarding the knowledge and the self-efficacy?
Well, I think the most important finding that we have so far is that teachers say there's no point in letting these pupils discuss with each other because they are not capable of discussing. But when you let them discuss, you see that they have very interesting concepts and they know much more about the European Union than they in the beginning think they knew, because they, for example, they perceive there is a difference between having a European passport and not having a European passport, and they see the connection between law on European level and law in other European countries that do not belong to the European Union. So I would back what Monika just said, that it's important to bring it on the table and show them what opportunities they have to be a part of a critical political society.
So now it's Laura Meyer and Reinhard Fischer, I heard, that I overlooked what you wanted to say. Laura, would you like to start?
Yes, hi, I'm Laura. I'm a project manager at the Schwarzkopf Foundation, and we, for the project Understanding Europe, and we actually do quite similar projects also in 12 different countries in the European, or not even only European Union, in Europe as such. And I was wondering who the trainers are that are doing your courses, because for us, it's mostly peers, so young people as well that do the courses. And I think this has been one of the really important aspects of the courses, and something that in the end creates this feeling of, I can also be interested in European politics because young people like me are interested as well. Yeah, so I would be interested in who your multipliers, I think you also talked about multipliers, are, and what your position on this is.
I can answer this. So we recruited students that we trained that carry out the workshop together with me mostly. So young people as well.
Right, but I would like to stress that for us it is, and for me it's really important that Märthe Stamer is also part of the team. We could have chosen only peers like our students. They are really beginning of 20s, they will become politics teachers, they've been pupils a few years ago. But I think it's also really important for our workshops that you understand the topics really well and that you have didactic competences. I think it's possible to have that in the beginning of the 20s, of course, and it's good to have them. But we didn't just want to train trainers for 4 hours and then say, do it, but we wanted this competence as well. And I guess Märthe Stamer doesn't look as young to the eyes of the pupils as she does in our eyes. but we still do agree, and we have this mixture for that. Reinhard Fischer.
Yes, I'm Reinhard from the Berlin Center for Civic Education. Our formats are much shorter, so we do have 3-hour workshops because we have the problem to convince teachers to give us these 2 days. But I liked your approach, and I think it's important to stress that the European Union is just one level of politics. The principles are similar to what happens in the municipality or in the land, in the state, on the federal level. But it's just one level of politics. Because I see a lot of civic education on the European Union is done through the fact that the European Union is a union of values or something. And that is really overwhelming for young people. And you sort of have an approach where you see the interest, like avoiding plastic here very concretely. And I think that is what really relates to young people and their life. They can't relate to the European Union as someone fosters, an institution fostering democracy and fostering the good things in life. So I like your approach to really stick to interest of people here.
Christoph and Irina.
Yeah.
First of all, I agree, Reinhard, but Christoph and Irina.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a most interesting debate, really, and thanks for the presentation and the other contributions as well. And I have just one question actually burning inside me, and that is the obvious question. Are you not using the peace narrative when it comes to the European Union? Because, I mean, that's the overwhelming and most common narrative to legitimize the project of a European Union, going back to the history of Europe in the 20th century, and then, of course, start telling the story of how leaders after the Second World War gathered and basically invented Europe as a new project. So I was just wondering, because I mean, I think there are approaches really to look at the European history and still clinging in a way to that peace project, which I mean, there is a certain ambivalence, and I think your approach might be a very good one. But of course, sometimes I'm wondering, should we leave it out altogether?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. We are not leaving it out. It is like an achievement of the EU and also a motive to forming the EU on day one. It will always be that we look at peace, but our days, I think we also need other motives, other motivation why we should still have the EU. And that is really solving problems that are better solved together than alone. And plastic is one example. Thank you. Irina.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you a lot for sharing your experience on your project. And I would like also to share a little bit a method which I use. I teach for PhD students and in postgraduate education for psychologists. And my course I also touch, it is not on citizenship education directly, but I touch such issues like trust in government and citizenship activity. And for involving participants, I use such methods as art coaching. That is to say, I offer the group to draw metaphors, like metaphor of ladder, and this method includes putting direct questions of where you are, where is your goal, and your resources. And what I have noted is that drawing with colored pencils and something like that make adult people more involved. Adult people are really fond of drawing, especially when it is on a definite topic. And this drawing make them open their mind and make them emotionally involved in the topic. that is what I wanted to say.
I think this is a very good last point of statement, because in the beginning I said how important is it to look at youth, and that is very promising to do civic education for young people. But I think I agree, and we all perhaps agree, that we shouldn't not look at adult people, because they are not lost and they are the majority. So I give the word to Yannick Petersen to close this conference. And I can already say thank you very much for your attention and for this discussion. And I hope to see you later in another workshop of the NECE Campus.
Thank you very much, Professor Oberle, and thank you very much, Märthe Stamer. Thank you everyone for attending this online meeting. Let me just quickly remind you, I have just reposted the link here in the Zoom to go on the HowSpace page. As Professor Oberle said, there will be more documents and information available tonight, tomorrow, and the space itself will remain active for the whole duration of the campus. You can find information on all the other campus events there. And please don't forget on this event page to go down and provide feedback for this session. So you can select an option there and indicate how you like the session. Yeah, thank you very much, and hope to see you as well on other campus events in the future.
So many thanks from my side as well, and I really want to thank all of you for a really brilliant and most interesting kickoff, leading us really to the core of what civic education is about. And I just really want to invite you to our next event on the campus, and one of the speakers is among us, and so I do not want to lose this opportunity to welcome Reinhard Fischer from the Civic Center of Civic Education in Berlin, the capital of Germany, who will speak about democracy education for immigrants. And the next event will start on Wednesday, August 26 at 12 p.m. if I'm not wrong. And I would love to see you again at this event, and of course all the others which are about to follow this month and in September and October. Please stay tuned. Thanks a lot again, and special thanks of course to Monika and Märthe for their presentation, and to Yannick for setting this up so brilliantly. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
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 Bye, thank you.
Okay.